Hi, I'm Elizabeth Sherman, and today I'm doing an interview with David and Richard Palmer. They have grown up in the village their entire lives, and they have a lot of fun and different memories to share. They talk a lot about their father's car business in Union Springs, as well as their love of cars. And they talk on their friendship with Bruce and Jean Carr, who we have on exhibit in the War Room. So check that out. That's a lot of fun. And going to high school and other fun memories of growing up. So enjoy my interview with David and Richard Palmer. And joining me in the interview is Joan Parsnick. Enjoy.
Do you want to go into kind of a little bit about how your family arrived here and talk about how long the family's been here and introduce yourselves?
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Dave Palmer. This is my brother Rich. Yeah, our dad had an opportunity. He was selling Fords for Tuttle,
King
Ferry. And a friend let him know of an opportunity, and so he applied to become a Chevrolet dealer. And this is in 1936, maybe. And so, at any rate, he was successful in being appointed as a Chevy dealer, and this friend loaned him some money to get started. Jim Delaney.
Jim
right?
Delaney.
And yep,
In
it's
the
that
yearbook.
same family, and he bought the property on Cuga Street. It currently is 125 Cuga Street. I just sold it last year, but so he had a Chevy dealership and that little bit of a building that's just on the south end of Saxton Electric. And he had-
Across from the
The
dealership.
old fire
Yes.
department.
yeah, the fire department was in the building that Saxton now occupies, and there was an attachment made to my dad's building, unfortunately, because it ruined the building. But at any rate, he operated there until 1947, when he had built the new structure across the street that is now Gillespie's. And so that's where we kind of grew up and got in lots of trouble. So that's how Gordon C. Palmer Chevrolet started. And Dad
Do you know
passed.
how old your dad was when he got that dealership? Do
How
you?
old was he?
He was 30.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
And he didn't buy it. He rented it.
Right.
He rented it twice. Or for when
paid
he
for it
bought
twice.
when he bought it and paid for it, he had finds out that he paid for it twice in rent, and then he bought it.
Yeah.
So
We all learned the hard way.
he kind of figures maybe that was a mistake.
Well, he probably needed to build up his business.
Oh yes, right, absolutely. And there had been 2 or 3 people there, previous Chevy dealers there,
Oh, I didn't know
in
that.
2 or 3 years, and they all went broke.
Oh.
So
Yeah, I didn't.
Bob
I didn't
Dreamus
remember
is,
that.
I think father maybe was one of them, I think. But I can't say for sure. I wasn't involved.
Well, yeah, so that's, and we lived in the house across from the post office to the south on the corner of Center Street. And so that was kind of kitty corner across from the original dealership. It's pretty handy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And still, and Dad owned all that property from Center Street almost to Park Street, including the old, what we called the castle up on the hill. And he sold the piece on the corner of Center Street for the post office.
Mm-hmm.
And there were the old stone barns, and he was trying to buy the what we called the castle that was built, from the stone quarrying of generations earlier. My our grandmother's grandfather's family, Mosier family, were instrumental in the quarrying back in the 1800s. And so, and what the heck was it the Backus family that built the mansions?
Yeah.
Including the
Yeah.
one next door and the one up
Holland.
with it that the Cayuga Nation now owns. So anyway, there was what we called the castle back there, and my dad was trying to buy the barns that remained because the structure had been taken down, and there are pictures someplace in this building of the original home that was just tremendous. But anyway, the fellow was resisting selling it, and then he decided he would sell it in 1944, and we had a terrible winter. And when he was being stubborn about selling it, he removed all the anchors for the roofs. And then Dad bought it, and he was going to try to preserve it, and the roof came right off in that 1944 winter. And so there's nothing left there today.
Right.
Oscar Schleppe tried to preserve one of the buildings, but they're gone now at any rate. So I want to mention, because we were supposed to think about memories,
Yes.
and so I thought, what's an early memory? And I think my earliest memory outside of the home was fire sirens in the middle of the night,
Right
because the fire station was right across from the house.
Oh, that's
on
fun.
Cuba Street. And
And
so
you lived on that side of the house.
yeah, we were, so and
Do you remember, Richard? Do you remember those fires?
I don't remember them bothering me. I've slept on the other end.
right, that's
And,
true. It made quite a difference.
I don't have any memory of that bothering me a bit.
Well, what really bothered me was in 1942, when I was 3, we started having blackouts for air raid practice. In case, I don't know what the idea was, in case some wayward Germans decided or Japanese decided to come to Union Springs and focus on wiping us out. But the siren would go off, and you had to turn the lights out and be quiet and sit in the dark. And that was kind of scary, because
Well,
we're
'cause you were just a
bumbling around the room, trying to, and so I can remember we were all huddled in a room on the on the south side of the house, and just outside that window was directly across from the fire station. And so we were all huddled in there being quiet about 4 o'clock in the morning. And I had a little pen light or something that I had put away in case of the situation. And so I had it on, and I was talking with somebody. But of course, I'm just a little squirt. But anyway, all of a sudden, on the window, and this heavy voice said, "Turn out the light." And I practically fell between the cracks in the floor. So, anyway, and I this big pole I wanted to tell you about. Later we get a picture of it, or I really want to donate it to the museum.
Oh, wonderful.
And it's about, I don't know, 7 feet tall.
Wow.
And it was used to move rail cars because all the new Chevys that came here came to the train station. This was way before they had trucks, hauling cars on the highway. And so this was used to joggle the cars, get them moving a little bit if they weren't in the right place. And I can remember in the early 50s, I don't know where you were helping, I don't remember, but Buster Osborne and I and somebody else, if we could get them, would go to the train station. This is like 1951, 52, and we'd have, the car would be right by the station.
You're about 12.
The track, there was a side track.
They bring the railroad car right down to the station down here.
Yeah, the track was, people remember, was on the west side of the train station, but they had a siding that came around the front of the station where people park now, and so that's where the cars would be unloaded onto the front of the station. And so we would pull there'd be 4 cars, 4 Chevys sitting in there, 2 jacked up and are pulled up on a chain hoist. And so we would take the top car and take it up a little farther, and then wiggle the bottom car out onto the deck there, and then get the other car out on the other side of the bottom, then pull the upper level down to get the one car out on the one side, and
hope that chain or pulley holds up, right?
oh my gosh, and then we get done, we have to put them all up.
I'll add a little bit to this story about that.
Yeah.
So the benefit to me, it turned out to be that from pulling that chain is that I turned out to be able to go up when Coach McBride got here. He had all of us climbing a rope
At the high school.
and what's now the library.
Uh-huh.
Upper deck. We had plays there too. But anyway, I found that I could go up that rope upside down faster than anybody else in my class could the right way. That was all from my wonderful
For
exercise
your job.
of bringing new Chevrolets to the populace.
So that was child labor, right?
Child labor, right, absolutely.
Yep. My dad should have been punished severely. You were going to say what?
Well, yes, I can say in 53, I was waiting for my golden Chevrolet Bel Air hardtop to get there. And it came, But the only problem was, the fellow in Auburn that had one coming also. And the car on top come down,
Oh,
and
no.
crunched the top on my car.
That's
Or
what I
on
was
his-
worried
on-
about.
I'm sorry, on his car. John,
Oh, good, it was his.
his name was John Perkins. He's gone now. So anyway, Buster said, boy, at least I'm glad it didn't happen to my car. And Buster said, John Perkins is going to have your car, and you're
Yeah,
going to
that's what I thought.
wait to
Yeah.
get this one fixed. Oh, well, all right.
The shoemaker doesn't get the shoes.
No,
right?
so anyway, it went to Gardner's Collision in Auburn, and I really don't recall if they put a new roof on it or they probably did. It's probably had to have a new roof, but this took like 2 months.
The poor guy had
And
to wait 2 months.
so anyway, I finally got it, and boy, it was a good one.
Was that your
And I
first
took
car?
I decked and shaved it. That's for people. Deck it, you take the trunk and take all the garbage off of it.
Like the trunk
the
handle.
only thing you got is the keyhole, right? That's all. And then the front, you take the hood ornament off, and it's decked and shaved. They call it. Oh, anyway.
So
That
those,
car had, at the end of 1 month, I believe it had 6,000 miles on it, I think.
where did you go?
Round and
Well, you wanted to borrow it with Dad, and you took a long trip.
Oh,
And then you got back, and gee, Ray, you ran good. I had dual exhaust on it, and, that was a very quick car.
now that, yes.
And so when they got back, well, I better take a trip too, right? So
so
we
you,
took a trip, and I think it was 6,000 miles. One trip.
We put a
So
lot of
then
miles.
the finish for that car was, to me, was when Charlie Combs' brother-in-law came, Reverend Combs, his son-in-law,
Reverend Combs was
Mary-
the pastor here in this
Mary
building.
Combs. He married this guy. Mary Combs married. I can't remember the guy's name that bought the car, but anyway, he traded in a '53 Plymouth, and just to show you that when he drove my car, it was all over for him. A Chevrolet was a lot better. So anyway.
you're
I went
still
in the car,
selling.
and I never saw it again. Never saw it. He was in the service. I think he was a male nurse, as I recall. He's a nice guy. But he had a lot better car when he left than he did when he came to Union Springs.
Was that your first car?
That was my first new car.
Right.
My father gave me the automatic transmission. That was that was his part. And then I had to pay for the rest of it by the week. Every month, every week.
Uh-huh.
And finally, I had a car paid for, finally. But we'd sell them and probably didn't lose much. I don't like a little, always, but
Were you married at that time?
no,
No.
no.
Because
I
I
was
heard.
playing the field.
Okay.
I'll tell you more about that trip.
So anyway,
You,
I'm going to go from the '53 to the '54. The '54 was a convertible, a black convertible. I have a picture of the car and all that, but I left it home today.
Whoa.
And that car came in on the railroad, but gee, they made a mistake. I wanted the car for a Memorial Day parade, and it was sitting, the day before, it was sitting on the railroad tracks in Auburn. So Ray Osborne and I went over and got it out of there. And I never forget this. I'm driving in the parade probably the next day, as I remember. Had the top down and everything. Had this guy, a war veteran, in the back seat. And
Do you remember who that was?
he was from Aurora, so I can't tell you. He was a real nice guy. But it really bothered me when he lit up a cigarette in the back of the car. And, I mean, I smoke too, so, you know, but anyway.
But that was your car.
I didn't want those back ashtrays to get ashes in them, you know. Well, anyway, he was waving to everybody, and I'm up there driving my, brand new car.
Scowling.
Yeah, probably. But anyway, that's my two 53s, or 53 and a 54.
Oh, it's a big
That was
year.
black, and I had that for a while. And then the 55s were coming out. So I wanted to get a 55, of course. And in 54, my wife did get a ride in that car.
The black
The
convertible.
black convertible.
So
Yeah.
that's how she became your wife?
Yeah, that's how she came. She couldn't turn me down because she liked that black convertible.
Yeah.
And,
You got a
So-
nice car.
and it was a beautiful car. So Dickie Koch, he worked at the garage. And they had a little squeak in the front when you went over bumps. Because the convertible would, they kind of wiggled a little bit because they didn't have a top on them.
Right.
So it hit that and it would go, eh. I says, Dick, he was living in Geneva. I said, take that car home and see if you can find out where that squeak is. So next morning, he said, yeah, it was the hood, the rubber under the hood, he says. So I had to lubricate that. He says, no problem anymore. He says, how much you got to have for that car? I want to buy it. So anyway, okay, well, we did that. And then the 55 Chevrolet arrived. In our 55, everybody, all the dealers had to get, one anyway. Mine came in, not mine, but the first one Gordon Palmer Chevrolet got was a 55 Bel Air two-door sedan. It was Canyon Coral and Shadow Gray. Beautiful car. But it came in over in Cortland. So we went to Cortland, and I got to drive it home. And let me tell you something, it had a V8 in it. And I had to try it out.
Uh-oh.
And I found out that day that they do 100 easy enough. So, but that wasn't dangerous. But anyway, the next day we got a telegram from Chevrolet that said, do not drive the new car until it's tested, checked out for some part they were leaving loose or something in the manufacture of them. And this was early in the production year, very early. This is a pre-introduction to the people.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, do not
not
because you
drive.
can you can lose control of the car. And I'm thinking, well, I already had it up to 100. But anyway,
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I
have the
already
loose part.
drove it.
there's a lot of things I can't tell you, But it's too
Were
late
you-
to get a ticket for this now.
Right.
And anyway, ours checked out okay. It was fine.
Thank
So-
goodness, right?
Yes, very good.
And I remember riding with Dad. We went to Cortland to get the car, and I don't know how we went to Cortland, because we didn't go through King Ferry east and that way, because we came back from Lansing on 90, and there's a shortcut, to go around King Ferry.
Mhm.
And we took the shortcut, Dad and I did, and he had the other car.
That was in '53.
Oh, that's right. That was the 53.
Yeah. I took the long
He took the long way,
The scenic route.
and because he was just ahead of us, and we got to that turn there by
where you
Milliken
turn.
Station, and he went to King Ferry, and we
straight.
took the short way, and we buzzed right along down through there, because Dad thought we're going to get ahead of him. And when we got to the Triangle, where the Triangle Restaurant was for a while, here comes this convertible around the curve. And I said, Dad, I think that's Rich. And he said, no, it couldn't be. I said, I think it was. He said, no, I'd be thunderstruck. I still remember that name. I'll be thunderstruck. How could he possibly have beat us, So you got to slow down, Now I want to tell you about why we took a trip with that 53 and put all those miles on there. Teddy Bobbitt and I. Teddy was my best friend. We used to do recordings. In fact, I still have the tape player that Teddy and I recorded things on, and I haven't gotten it working to see whether his voice is still on this tape. This is in 1952, 53. And he was at our house on the corner there across from the post office almost every night. And we would listen to Gabriel Heater, commentator on the radio, and try to mimic him
Well,
on the tape recorder. Funny. And anyway, we were at track practice, and I was getting ready to high jump. I wasn't really couldn't do very high, because I never could figure out how to do a roll. But I discovered that I could jump 5 feet straight on and keep running. But anyway, I was getting ready to high jump, and there was a storm brewing. And Teddy was throwing the discus. He was right next to me. And all of a sudden, crack of lightning. And a week before, I had been giggling inappropriately in Cynthia Parsons' English class because we were reading a story in the Revolution, and this general came riding up to Washington, I can't remember his name, and said, "Sir, I am killed." And I giggled, and she said, "What's so funny, David?" And I said, "How can you be telling somebody if you're killed?" And she said, "You can be killed and not dead yet." Oh, 2 weeks later, I get hit by lightning, and I can remember clearly as I was thrown to the ground, screaming, "I am killed." So, after about 15 minutes, and Coach Mulligan was racing out to the building because the bolt actually went through his office in the basement of the high school.
oh,
And so he knew something was up. Anyway, I woke up to people shaking me and slapping me and talking to me. And looked, so they got me up anyway, and I looked over and there's Teddy, black, right next to me.
Teddy
So-
was taller.
So, it's true.
And
So,
he had a discus too.
what's
he was-
that?
He also had a discus, right? That he was
Yes.
going to throw.
Yes.
Metal.
Yes, probably. So anyway, that was a really tough time,
That had to be 54.
and I think it was 54, but we had the 53.
His
Car was
father
available.
got a new 54 Chevy after that.
So anyway, Dad said after the funeral and all, which was right here in this building, and I remember Dick Moon, the vice principal, had an assembly about Teddy and about going to the funeral, and a very close friend of mine at that time, Barbara Coker, who became Barbara Foster, was upset because Dick Moon said regarding the funeral, if Ted's body, he said, would be there with, and she was upset that he spoke that way. But anyway, we got all through the funeral, and Dad said, let's take a little trip.
Oh, that's how the trip.
And so we took his car and we went to Kentucky. And geez, we were driving around the Kentucky hills, hillbillies. We went on a road up this winding road on a mountain, and I remember the shack of about 8 kids running around in diapers and so on. And so we got to see the Smokies and had a really great time. But we did put a lot of miles on Rich's car. So that's how that
That's how that journey happened.
how that came about. I don't know if I should. My mother would be horrified, but I have to tell you quickly something I remember about that earlier than that. My dad asked me one late fall, which would you rather have for Christmas? A St. Bernard puppy or a Lionel train set? And I immediately said, because I knew he really wanted a St. Bernard puppy, I said, oh, I'd like a train. And so I got the train set, and weeks went by, and he said, I want to go and see the Smith puppies. And we went up Poplar Ridge and picked out, they had this mother had 14 puppies, and we picked ours, and we went from there to my grandmother's at Five Corners up past King Ferry. And when he went in to see my grandmother, he had the puppy in his shirt pocket. He's 4 weeks old, and until my grandmother finally discovered what he was carrying and exclaimed. But at any rate, when Prince was about 1.5 years old, I decided one day, nobody was home, and I decided that I would, because the lake was frozen, I decided that Prince and I would go to the island. And we did. And we walked around the island. There was, of course, nobody anywhere, and nobody on the shore. It was very cold, and nobody was near the lake. We went right down Basin Street and out.
Right on walking.
And so we were coming back from the island, and we were about 2/3 of the way maybe back, and I noticing this, what looked like a crack And so I kind of was shuffling my feet, and all of a sudden I heard a splash, and I looked over, and Prince was gone. And I was horrified.
He was a heavyweight, not a lightweight, Prince.
He was a big dog. Well, somehow, instinctively, I think he went to the bottom, because it's only about you used to be able to touch the bottom all the way to the island with an oar of the boat. The other side of the island was much deeper. Anyway, so I'm standing there horrified, and he torpedoed out of the water, just whoosh, all of a sudden, and landed on the ice, and went his legs out like this, and started inching along on top of the ice. Well, I thought, I was terrified that he was going to go in again, but extremely impressed with his strategy. And he started crawling toward me, and I said, well, I got to get out of here. And so I'm walking along this crack, shuffling my feet like this, and I made it to shore. And he made it to shore. And we went home up there. The post office wasn't there yet. And got dried off. Nobody was home. And I've never told this story. But I told Rich the other day that I was considering telling that story.
That's a wonderful story.
So, and then later, there was a basketball game in King Ferry, and Rich doesn't remember for sure, but I think he used to be timekeeper for the ball games. And I can remember being at King Ferry at this ball game, and we all came home, and the building at the bottom of Mason Street, I can't think what they called that, was on fire. It was the biggest fire in Union Springs in a long, long time. And so everybody was down there.
Down by the lake.
Yeah,
Down to the lake.
Where Costelli's.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that was one of the things that facilitated, actually, Castelli's ability to make improvements there. It turned into the marina 2 or 3 years later. That was about maybe 52 when the fire was there. So anyway,
Do we know that, when that fire was?
Well,
it'll be in the record
we
someplace.
can look it up to make sure.
I'd like to know when that was.
Okay, we
'cause
can check.
And so I made a couple of notes here of memories. The 50s you were talking about, when that first V8 and so on, that was a really big deal. That was an auto revolution in the mid 50s. That was when hot cars, everybody was drag racing, including me, and we had the thing that was really different about new car introductions in those days was that we had the windows in the showroom all papered over, so nobody could see the new car.
Oh,
And we had a big announcement. People would pour in. We'd have cider and donuts and everything. And it was and then if you had some special people, you might give them a sneak preview and even take them into the basement to see the other cars that were waiting to
basement of Gillespie.
basement of the dealership,
Uh-huh.
which ended up being flooded during Agnes. But anyway, so that was the 50s, mid 50s were really a big deal. And I remember the parades. Our dad would always supply cars for the parade and lead the parade with Harlow Winnie, who was the fire marshal, and for the American Legion, would be out front there leading the parade and the band and so on, and it was a exciting time. That was the Memorial Day thing, but the cars then. And did you bring your pictures? Any of your pictures?
No.
Well,
Oh.
we're going to get those.
Oh, those are the ones you're
I'm
going to
gonna
show.
get them now.
Yes, we will get them
And
for
I,
sure.
I remember Bruce Carr. I remember when I think about what I remember from those days, it's people, wonderful people, teachers, wonderful teachers, Catherine Hockaborn and Edith Tanner, and for example,
Mulligan was my pet.
no, and
He was the best.
they anyway, wonderful people. But Bruce and Gene Carr were really local heroes. Bruce, was the top pilot in the 9th Air Force in Germany. He was the #1 railroad buster in World War II. He came out of the service and was the right wing pilot. I get mixed up, the Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels. Which
He
one's
was,
the Air Force?
He was the where you had to be the best pilot.
Yeah, he was one of the top 100 pilots in
The
nation.
Like, what was the name of those guys?
oh,
Blue Angels? Not the Blue Angels. No.
was it Thunderbirds or Blue Angels?
Thunderbirds. Thunderbirds.
Thunderbirds.
He was original Thunderbird.
He
It
was.
wasn't called a Thunderbird then, but
When the Air Force started this thing where they do stunt flying and so on, he was the right wing pilot, meaning he was calling the shots for the whole team. And they put on these air shows. That's when that all started. But I remember one day when I was, I don't know, 12, so that would have been in 1950. I turned 12, 51. Anyway, every once in a while, Bruce would come flying through Union Springs with a Mustang at about 400 miles an hour. And I remember I was washing a car in the bay at what is now the south end of Gillespie's. And the door was open, and I heard the plane coming, and because I was attuned to it, and I ran out, and there were 2 huge spruce trees just outside there, and I just got out there in time for Bruce to come over and clip the top of the spruce tree with a propeller on his Mustang. I don't know how fast he was going, but it was through town. I don't
How
think
to trim your trees.
anybody
Yeah.
else saw it. And then his brother is right behind him, and he flew over what became his home later, across from the post office where we lived. Gene Carr ended up living. And he hit the other tree,
Oh my.
and there are cones, it's just like a dust storm, and cones all over the driveway, all over the highway. I kept a bunch of them, but
Wow.
they of course weren't supposed to do that, but they got away with it, and I'm glad they did. And Bruce, incidentally, was grounded because he flew his squadron on what do they call it, Armistice Day or whatever, when the war was over. He flew his band of followers, whatever, under the Eiffel Tower,
Oh,
and he got in a little trouble for that. But they let him go, and his Mustang.
his wingman was the only one that went with him.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
Okay.
wow.
So, but that plane, his plane, what was it? Angel's Playmate.
Angel's Playmate. That's over there
Is it?
in the museum.
I
Yes,
think it's.
we can go in and look after. I didn't realize there were 2 pilots in the film, Bruce and
Gene.
Gene.
Yeah. Well,
And Gene
Bruce
was-
was the really famous guy because he was in the combat.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it was fantastic. And
I told Gene, I'll break in a second. Bruce told me the proudest day of his life was when he drove into New Jersey, and his brother's name was Eugene Carr, company, commander of this big air base in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Of course, they had just didn't like each other.
no, they had family.
It was a family problem there.
But that changed things.
But we used to hear about this in school.
He was glad to hear that, but didn't express any particular favorable emotion about it.
His mother was I don't know if
One of
you had.
my favorite teachers.
Yes. She was. What grade were you?
What
Mrs.
grade?
Yeah, with her.
Wow, by golly.
I was third
Fourth,
grade.
I think fourth grade, maybe.
She was my teacher, and so this would have been during the war, and so she would tell us stories, the letters that she had gotten,
Oh, wow.
and so on. It was really something.
She probably had the letters. Maybe read
Yeah.
you some.
Yeah.
And I
And-
can,
Our dad later he became ambassador to The Hague, and our dad went twice to The Hague to spend a week with him, and
Oh,
they
my.
just had a great time. He also was in charge of the red button in the basement of the Pentagon.
Oh,
And that red button was the beginning, if it should ever be pressed, of war in the U.S. and was to call out, emergency call to the world that we're at war, and he was, because of his position in charge of the basement, the secret place of the Pentagon, he took the phone call. He told me about this personally because I spent a couple nights with him in Washington much later. He took the phone call from President Kennedy to call off the invasion of Cuba. Because in 1961, just when I was graduating from the General Motors Institute engineering program, I was expecting to be drafted to go to war in Cuba, and everybody was expecting that there was going to be real serious trouble. The Cuban Missile Crisis, remember it was called.
yes.
Yes.
And anyway, he actually took the phone call and said, call it off, because they were prepared. It was that close to an attack. Kennedy called it off. Kennedy personally called him and told him. I was also with him later because I had a fellow in Washington that was helping me with my dissertation in 1972, I guess. And I was spending the nights at Bruce's apartment, and he demonstrated something to me. He had 3 or 4 telephones, and he was telling me about how he could talk to so and so. And he picked up the phone, and he called General Blackburn in Germany, who was head of the Strategic Air Command, and just said, "Hi, this Donald Blackburn was the guy's name," and I looked him up just the other day, And he was chatting along, how are things going? And he said, well, nothing. He says, we had a little incident off Siberia. Some Russians but we sent out, somebody, and they turned around, and so no big deal. But this is the guy that was controlling the Strategic Air Command, and he's just having a friendly chat with him. And he also is the guy who claimed that in I don't remember for sure, in the Vietnam War, he was activated. He got permission. He was too old to go back to war, but he got permission, and he trained. They dropped him in the jungle in the Philippines, Bruce Carr, to see if he could find his way back to safety. And it took him a week, but he did. And so he passed that test, and so he was allowed to go to Vietnam.
Oh.
And he said they had a plan for how they're going to win the war. And I don't mind saying this publicly. He said that Mr. McNamara, who was Secretary of State, was a traitor, and that he and others had put together a plan to end the war. And McNamara blabbed about it to somebody at a party in Detroit, and the word got out. He said, and as a result of that, he personally witnessed the Viet Cong starting this parade of attack vehicles coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And he said, and we knew that, and they knew, they were afraid it was going to happen because McNamara had blabbed about it. And so here they came, and that was the end of the American opportunity to win the war in Vietnam, which was above top secret. Nobody knew it. They couldn't prove it. And it was so political that nobody dared say anything. But he contended till the day he died that we would have won the war in Vietnam, except for McNamara, who had this philosophy of proportionality. When somebody did something, you should only give a proportional response. If somebody slaps you, you slap him back, but you don't shoot him. That was McNamara's proportionality theory. So anyway, Bruce Carr claimed to his death that was what happened in Vietnam.
Wow.
So anyway, I think about so many people, wonderful people who lived in Union Springs. I think it's interesting. The house we grew up in ended up being occupied by Fred Gardner, who was a great teacher, an entrepreneur with his insurance business and so on. He ended up living in our house. And Gene Carr ended up living in our house.
Famous pilot there lived there, Lauderdale.
Yes, that's right.
And Lauderdale
Elliot Lauderdale.
was, I forget what they called him, but anyway, his name was General Smith. And he was Smith's personal pilot.
Oh.
And he said about Lauderdale, he's the best pilot in the world.
Well, I guess
He
they-
also-
That was his opinion.
He also flew Eisenhower, and he was personal pilot to John Foster Dulles, who
Beetle Smith.
after whom
That was General Beetle Smith.
after whom Dulles Airport was named. So,
So
Great-
how did
great.
it go from you lived there, and then Cars,
Fred Gardner,
Fred
Gardner.
Gardner, and then
Lauderdale.
Lauderdale, and then
and then Gene Carr.
Gene Carr.
Gene
Wow.
Carr. He
Wow.
just died, you know.
Yeah, just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know who's there now. I think his,
His
son.
wife.
I think his son sold.
His wife lives there.
She is.
Gene's wife.
She still lives there.
As far as I know.
Is that right? Oh, I would like to go and talk with her. I did not know that. Okay. Hurricane Agnes came along. What, 72?
I know, but we got
And-
hit by two of them.
And
69 and 72.
yeah, and flooded the basement of the dealership.
What was down there?
Cars.
New cars?
well,
or-
No, old cars.
The,
Old
sec-
car.
the second, I put a 59 Chevy down there, put it up against the door, thinking that this is in 72, and I thought that that's a heavy car. That water come down there, we could get that sucked out of there before it went in, but the water come down that ramp and just pushed that
Poured in. Pushed the car.
4,000-pound car right back.
Oh,
When I
wow.
turned the lights
Yeah.
on to see what's down there, the lights were covered by water. That's how much the ceiling lights.
Oh,
It
my.
actually lifted the floor of the building. The water is so high in the basement.
We had
Crushing the roof.
we had a situation the second time because then we'd moved our parts department down there.
Oh, my.
So
Oh no.
It was a disaster.
You lost all those.
$35,000 worth of parts down there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tires, everything.
Everything was coming down from the hill, right? Everything
Well, no, it
poured
was
in.
Right
the
down
creek, right out back.
down the creek.
The creek
And
over.
that creek was one thing I wrote down was back in 44, about 44, 45 maybe. My buddy Mert Robbins and I were down there on that creek just before you go into the tunnel, you know, for the water. And doggone it, Mert, and I was a little bigger than he was, but he went through the ice.
Oh.
And he, or up to his knees probably, or so in the water, but I remember, boy, we got double for that. Oh my gosh. My mama, she doesn't like that mess down there in this ice. So,
But
Anyway.
maybe I just kept my mouth shut more. But I went through that tunnel many times, and so I would have kids at school ask me when I could take them through
Take
the
them
tunnel.
through.
I mean, it was
yeah.
at that time it was one of the longest stone, beautiful engineered
Aqueduct tunnels.
stone
Yeah.
architecture with
The keyhole.
what do you call the keystones at the
Keystone.
top of the arch, and just beautiful. And so kids want because it came out, you know, back up, and I happen to own the property where it came out on the west side of the road. It's now building is now being renovated by Dan Cyril, but and there was in the paper about 10 years ago, you know, there was pictures in paper of this big hole in the tunnel. That was at the outlet. It happened to be right on my land behind the apartment building. So anyway, I would take kids through there now and then. And I remember one time I said, I heard something. And I said, "Come on, hurry up!" And I took off running, and they said, "What's the hurry? What's the matter?" I said, "Just come on." And but they were ignoring me, and out it came. Somebody flushed the toilet,
Oh dear.
and in Union Springs, in those days, that was the sewer system. I mean,
That was the sewer system. Yeah.
we've made a lot of progress, believe me. Because everybody on Park Street and on Center Street at the top, where Vernie Yates lived, up there where that crossroad is, or Tony Russell lives. The creek comes across the road there, you know,
Yes.
and everybody who could just ran a pipe into the
Oh dear.
creek.
Which eventually went into the lake.
Well,
Oh
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what the heck?
Oh, dear.
Yeah, they cleaned
Oh,
that
no.
up. pretty good. They fixed that deal.
But you knew the ends on that one.
I did not know that.
So you always went through at the right time.
I never was in that. But before they fixed it, they thought they were fixing it because the stones were coming out. They bought a great big pipe that they could put down in there. So they did that. That was the first time. That was the first mistake. And he got the devil for driving a Corvair through that. It was up on the ground.
My dad.
He drove his car right through there.
I was in school at
Bad
that
kids. Well, Corvair was a smaller car.
Right.
Yeah,
That was smart.
That's right. Yeah, well, that would fit good.
Yeah.
Well,
Just as long as it didn't start tipping when you're in there.
Oh, jeepers.
Yeah.
well, they've made several. The state has messed up twice. Seriously messed up their engineering on that.
Yeah, they knew more the first time they did it than they did the second, at least the second time,
Yeah,
and fixed it.
but when hurricane,
They figured out how many cubic feet of water could go through there.
Mm-hmm.
And we got flooded in our basement of the garage because one of the reasons was somebody threw a mattress
yeah,
over in the creek, and nobody got it out of there. And then the rain came,
And took
and
that
then
mattress
that
right up
and
against
blocked it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
ended up
say.
helped putting us right out of business. Actually,
yeah.
Wow.
That was
I mean,
wicked.
it was just a costly deal.
Well, and Agnes, do you remember Agnes? Are you old enough to remember?
Oh, yeah, I know.
Uh-huh.
I remember Agnes.
Yeah.
72.
And we took a plane ride because in 1965 I bought from the Kubats the property on the hill where we still live, and I had just started flying, and so I wanted to build a little airfield there, and so I had a plane at that time with Agnes, and so Rich and I took a ride to see about the flood, because in Cayuga, Mudlock, north of Cayuga,
Mm-hmm.
The water was right up to the highway, and so the houses were all in trouble.
They always are, but that was
Yes.
worse.
Yeah. But it was an amazing, and I was too stupid to think to take a camera, because Cayuga Lake was about double its width at that time.
Right.
And-
Right out to the road.
One of the interesting things was Cayuga, right at the extension now of Genesee Street,
Uh-huh.
there was a bridge, and one can read about it.
Mm-hmm.
It was used it was rebuilt during the War of 1812 to get powder to Niagara, gunpowder from the gypsum mines in Union Springs.
Wow.
And then it was eventually wrecked by one of my Mosier ancestors by taking a too heavy load across, and it broke part of the bridge, and it was abandoned after that. But anyway, we're flying along, looking at this extraordinary expanse of water going north of Cayuga, and we noticed the pilings for that bridge. And I'm sure they're still visible, but here the water was, how much higher than, but we could still, it was so prominent, all right, remember that?
Yeah.
The
Right.
pilings from that bridge that has been gone for, 150 years or something. And so I understand that they mark fishing spots, fish gather, some species gather around those pilings, yeah.
Interesting.
But Agnes just was a terrible storm. And I had recently purchased a old fire truck from the King Ferry Fire Department, a 34 Ford that I bought, I think, in '65. My excuse was that I was going to have an airfield and I needed a fire truck. And so I used that fire truck to help pump out the basement. And I kept that fire truck
Well, that was
for another 5 years or something. And then I donated it back to the King Ferry Fire Department about, 6 years ago, I guess. And they're still using it in parades. It only
Wow.
had 3,000 miles on it when I bought it, and I only put about 50 on it. But that was Agnes, and I hope we don't get another one like that, because Union Springs, all the water that came out of that tunnel and then it filled up the basement, ended up going across the street and down Basin Street. And it wiped out the roadway on its way down that little slope at the corner of Basin and Cayuga Street.
Well, when you pumped it, where did you pump it?
It was just out,
Right
out to the west side,
Went down
so
Route
it
90.
would go down
Yeah.
Route 90 and go around the corner and
And then down, right?
down the hill.
You.
So,
Wow.
So that was 69.
here we are in the old church.
Presbyterian Church.
Yep, and part of the United Ministry. They used to alternate, like every, 3 months, 6 months,
Go from
from the what was the Methodist Church, and come over here.
and the Episcopal too. It was.
Yes.
Were you both married here in this church?
Nope.
No.
No, I was married up in King Ferry.
Oh,
Yeah.
Where Gene is a King Ferryan,
Yeah.
and Alicia was the
So
Bainbridge.
I was a Presbyterian. And then when we started going to Auburn church, we went to the Methodist church, 99 South Street,
uh-huh.
because the family, my mother and someone went there. So I said, well, we'll go there while
For the
she's here
family.
alive.
Mhm.
And we liked it so well. We says, well, I guess we'll stay right here. So that's what we did. And we're still there.
I just hope there'll still be churches here in another 50 years.
It was very fun meeting you and talking to both of you. I enjoyed hearing all your memories and stories that you had to share. So,
Thank you.
yes.
Yeah, we appreciate being able to comment and really appreciate your project. I think that a lot of people will find it interesting because there are more interesting people
Yes.
that have been participating and contributing here.